Kero dio ngwan, kero dio ngwan, kero kan jok. Tedi ba gwas ke kui chali, ken chituo, kete chituo, no wal. And wal barai ke kui gug ni, te chit kap ke 1960. Gug to ngwan ke gug ni barai ke kui dien ke gug dang ngwan, ke die kan kon ban rai ku din ko kan de ne very important in tong ke tin te ke story one ke long du lo tang ken te me la yo mai no ke mai no ri ko me rai na ko ku din ko nguni te da te chi kan la de go ke te chi kan la de je ka kan system dan system wo ke nya wan do ba to ke nyam ke gu ni tu kwai ba ngan dio ke ba ngang điều dân phát to cái giờ làm anh em and then cái co nó chia cái co thang qua người đi được là bình ban là cái guru kiên ở thế ban này to cái trung quay cái chơi nó chỉ còn cái thai cái to là để đàn nên là được có đấy cái bé cái có đấy ôi ôi cho cả nhà nhiều anh lui đi cho cả nhà nhiều anh and then mắt được cái yuku mà ra cái này mắt được cái nhà nhiều anh cái cam điên cái này mà biết ne ate dak beka nasser then you been come in a most short George in 1973 ko wana rek kam dien kene do bi chuk la ko yang te kon te jala do ku man kene yang te kon da de ku man te ki dom ka made da ne made ne bar kene nuore made chai ne kene nuore and then made guy ja kam ni ken karo ke kam ga jo ko ru ken to ke ko na ban ne right jo din te di to talk two-way street this two-way street one way che ke be ko la ri on ne te di ta kon ka majority of young people tin ko ke to na ken ngai ke ne english long ko go ri yo ne be ke learn through language na de ngai ken ko cha ga discriminate anyway but me ngai ken ke gwa dia tin bukan me chalat bukan follow ko kan dor dong bu lo do wi mon ko run ta be te de be ba kuin ke ko to lưng ni ke yo mi to lưng ni to ka sit ke to lưng mi to ba ga ga den pa yo ko la ba ya ko to na ba ko la nei de ko tin la no ra ke tin ke ko to no ko to na e je no to ba ne liang wan ne kan
Prophet banging dial Tukuak second is go on Sunday, January 18th, 2015 at 7:02 p.m. Tukwak Bangong Dio. Bangong Dio, Tukuak. Where there is prophecy, there is also history. Intro. We have to begin this story with the composition of newer society was changing throughout the 19th century. However, this change started with the newer migration to the East Nile under their famous leader Lajer Dingi and Duak Puot, and then Kotom the Ngunding, whose parents were among the migrants, the first newer prophet of the 19th century, since the newer Cr Shore the tree where the man was born. The assessment and expression of the ideals and values of such a society was a complex undertaking, doubly tricky because of the diversity of ideas to assess. The prophets who appeared on the frontier addressed many groups, not just newer society, but also Dinka, Enuak, A, Ngwa, and others. This has done by Ngunding himself, Bongong Diau, whose nickname is Tukuak, and Wt Niang Gatkek, who addressed the Enuake, Nuer Udak, and the Highlander of the Ethiopians communities at Itang in 1992. And through their efforts, the Dinka mythologies and symbols, particularly, become part of the religious imagery and symbols armory of the Nuer. The activities of the prophets were new in this respect and are acknowledged as new by Nuer. Since then, Nuer has no types of those prophets like in the 19th century. This is Storytelling US about Bongong Diau. Bongong Diau type of his career began with Bangong Diau worked as a houseboy, whose well-known name came Tukuek Bangong Diau some years later on. There Bangong Diau has a complex story of his career. First of all, Bangong Diau is from eastern Jikini of Gajik Nuer of C Ring section. Bangong showed difficulty in following Ngunding's model during the Enyunya One War in the 1960s. Bangong Diau was the son of a chief policeman and him. He served as a boy to John Wayul Boom of the Western Nuer, the son of Boom Dio, who then worked as a junior administrator in Nasir. Bangong Di was a quiet boy, rarely speaking to anyone, a childhood trait shared with many other prophets during their childhood. Bangong accompanied John Weil on his administrative duty to the northern Sudan when John was transferred. As soon as he joined the growing Nuer migrant workers in Khartoum. Eventually, he sought to work outside Sudan simultaneously. It's indicative of the changing world of the Nuer that different but incompatible accounts of Bangong's seizure take as their reference points of changing world of the Nuer consisting aspects of modern Nuer society. This was the first time the Nuer world turned upside down. The question was asked in 2020 in the online discussion, Hztza Bol Bolivia. The question asked were the generation of whom you think make significant changes in the more newborn live that caused them to look down everything and said, if you think of it, the answer was Jack by age sets. Generation. As mentioned above, Bangong worked with the assistant commissioner at Nasir district, which made him have a complex career story. During his seizure, Bangong had some difficulty to attempts following Ngunding's model during the Enyunya One civil war in the 1960s, when he was back to the Eastern Nuer and joined the Ananya. The weak point here is that Tuklukas was chosen to be one of the generations changed generation joined the going, Nuer migrant workers, in Khartoum as the same time Tukak went to Libya workers as well. Bangong should have to stand tall as a good excellently for those young people who worked so hard and made Khartoum City how it now looks. The newer changing world had made so different but incompatible accounts of Bangong's seizure take as their reference points of changing world of the newer, consisting aspects of modern newer society. In contrast, they had made everything easy for the rest of the newer community. Tukuak Banging Diao seizure. When coming to Bangong's seizure, there have been some miracle. In fact, a bird known as a vulture landed on his head while working in Libya. That divinity originally troubles him was the Falada divinity according to the history after the West African Muslim immigrants found throughout North Africa, and this have afflicted Bangong during his wandering, recreating the experience of many 19th century Nilotic people. The Bangong Diao seizure began after a vulture landed on his head while working in Libya. According to history, it was after the West African immigrants found throughout North Sudan and Libya. The seizures could have plagued Bangong during his wandering experience. Bangong Diao returned to Upper Nile. After Banging Diao returned to Upper Nile, he immediately joined the Enyunya One, and he was assigned to his unit stationed in the Lunuwer country. In about 1968, he was able to visit Ngunding Mound, be at Wec Den. Accordingly, Bangong found metal ring. As soon as he saw it, he went mad at picking it up as long as he stayed there. Assault, Bangong was taken home as he became an angry man, making him lead the Inyanya as a soldier. After Bangong Dayao returned to Upper Nile, he immediately joined the Enyanya 1. He was assigned to his unit stationed in the Lunur country in about 1968, which allowed him to visit Ngunding Mount B at Wekdang. And according to his background, Bangong went there and found a metal ring. As soon as he got that, he went mad about picking it up as long as he stayed. According to that, when he found a metal ring, and he went mad at picking it, Bangong was taken home as he became angry, making him leave the Inyanya as a soldier. Bangoang was home. And as soon as he left the guerrillas and came home, he eventually announced as seized by a divinity with the given ox, Tutting Quack. Quack, a spotted bull with black and white color, if you will. This led many people to call him Tukuak, and his name finale became like his father, and as a result, many people from the eastern Nuer knew him by the name Tukwak. As soon as he left guerrillas and came home, he eventually announced as seized by a divinity with the given OX name Tatan Kuac, a spotted bull with black and white color. This led many people to call him Tukuak, and his first name became his father. Many people in eastern Nuer knew him as Tukuak. There is no joke here. As soon as he left the guerrillas and came home, he eventually announced as seized. Bangong Dayao began adopting the name Dang Kor. Bangong Dayao began adopting the name Dang Kor. Bangong Dayao reinforces his association with one of the Ngunding Ox names by referring to his divinity as Dang Kor, Ngunding's ox name. The metal ring he picked up might most have been a summons to Dang, and as Ngunding used to do before. Bagong began to send his metal ring to the person accused of various crimes. Also, he is reputed to have proved his power over life by sacrificing and resurrecting a bull. He gained a reputation as a healer, curing the sick and making barren women fruitful. He gained a reputation as a healer, curing the sick and making barren women fruitful. Bangong Dayao began adopting the name Dang Kor. Bangong Dayao reinforces his association with one of the Ngunding Ox names by referring to his divinity as Dang Kor, Ngunding's Ox Na. The metal ring he picked up might most have been a summons to Dang, as Ngunding used to do before Bagong began sending his metal ring to the person accused of various crimes. Aleph, he is reputed to have proved his power over life by sacrificing and then resurrecting a bit. He gained a reputation as a healer, curing the sick and making barren women fruitful. The adultery became the goal for his spirit. Quack denounced adultery and was able to expose the guilty party. He also tried to suppress magic, hence, the government became increasingly confined to the towns in the final years of Bangong and came more in demand to settle disputes in the rural areas. By 1969, the local government inspector in Nasir reported that he was credited banging for dealing with things that couldn't be proved in court. Bangong was noted for attempting to create peace in a broader community when there was very little peace among them. For example, Jikini society experienced intense internal and external strife. The war between Anyway and as well as the government generated several intersectional that have been seen in Zaraf Valley. At the same time, Bangong Dayao, in his Siring section, was feuding with the neighboring of C. Nyajani section, and with the court of the president of Gajik Chief Duke Bichik. Samuel Ater Dak, the Nasir Commissioner, 1969. Samuel Ater Dak, the Nasir Commissioner, 1969. As concerning the increase, fighting between Jikini themselves, Anyway and Meben. Bangong settled the feuds between Rang and Nyajani. He generally forbade fighting between Gojek sections and prevented two Gojek areas from raiding the Mebane. Tuquac, for making peace among the people. For this reason, he by the anyway of Opano and the Newer from the other part, such as from faraway Sudan and Ethiopia. They all came to offer sacrifices and received his blessing. These tangible proofs of his peaceful inclination were temporarily aroused by his having been in the Inyanya. Visiting Khartoum and Libya helped him learn much more than newer prophets. Southern, who dominated the administration, urged toleration of the local inspector at Nasir, Mr. Atir Dak, with mixed Newer and Dinka parents, ruled out that Tuquac should not be touched as long as he sticks to his mission, and referred to the violence in Zaraf Valley between Ghaniyet and Rui Quick, which is an example to expect from driving Prophet into opposition. Increased fighting between Jikini themselves. Anyway, and Mebane. Bangong settled the feuds between Si Rang and Si Nyajani. He forbade fighting between Gojek sections, generally, and prevented two Gojek areas from raiding the Mebane. For this reason, he was visited by Anyway and Mebane, and Newer from the other part, such as from faraway Sudan and Ethiopia SD. They all came to offer sacrifices and received his blessing. These tangible proofs of his peaceful inclination were temporarily aroused by his having been in the Inyanya. The Southern, who dominated the administration, urged toleration of the local inspector at Nasir, Mr. Atir Dak, with a mixed Newer and Dinka parent G. He should not be touched as long as he sticks to his mission, and refers to the violence in Zaraf Valley between Ghaniyet and Rui Quick, which is an example to expect from driving the Prophet into opposition. Bangong's relations with both government and the Inyanya were delicately balanced. The government sent him gifts of cattle, and he replied with assurance as a peaceful person. At the same time, he sent his emissaries to the court, but he refused to meet with any government official or visit any government center. He was pleading the prohibition of his divinity. The Inyanya. Bangong received Anyanya, who came to his cattle camp and was looking for food, leading while he constantly feeds them by giving them some cows, estimated to be 500 herds of cattle. This is to get the guerrillas settled down and prevent them from having raided the village as they were doing it to the other until mid-1972. In 1970, Bangong Dio fought the government. The government, therefore, thought that Tuquac association with the rebel couldn't continue to be tolerated forever. Government army accused Bangong that he was collaborating with Anyanya as the government had raised cattle. As a result of that raid, Bangong and his supporters could defeat the two battles before withdrawing when his base was attacked by the Air Force jet. What makes Tuquac survive between the opposing forces, Anyanya and the government? His being survived between the two opposing forces was because Bangong's dream was to carry out a small, rich, a peace and, simultaneously, failed like the prophets of the 1920s. He could not avoid being drawn into disputes with the government. This was a prophet of government. These were the government prophets of the 1960s who tried to create peace where they wanted their effort. In 1972, the peace agreement in Addis Ababa. It was 1972 when peace finally came with the A/A agreement of March 27, 1972, and political authority had to be readjusted. Prophets and divinity to each other with a new peace came to the government, including many Newer and Dinka. The divinity renewal of civil war all was back to the South Sudan local and autonomy government in 1972. The Upper Nile Province governor. The Upper Nile Province governor invited the Newer prophets to the 1972 peace accord. Concerning the prophets in the 1972 peace accord, The Upper Nile Province Commission, which became the first Southern Sudan man as the ruler of the the province commissioner at the beginning of Addis Ababa peace was Moses Chul-Juac, who used his common bond to try to bring Bandung Diao, who was considered the most politically of who they knew that Tukuak were aware of modern life, because of his service in the Enyanya, one as a soldier. He was one of the modern newer changing worlds, then he is critical to the commissioner, to find a way to bring him in. The province commissioner actively recognized Tukuak until the border forbade the intersectional fights, to bear to be a good citizen. Still, President Dup Bijik of Gajit Court was not convinced and refused to meet Bandung Diao at Malakal when they were both present. Tukwak gave up in 1973 because of the government's particular assignment. He responded that his people were enlisting in the province police unit. That is to say, Bandung did not come to Malakal until 1973. Goyet and Muriquit were reluctant to disarm their followers or take them to Malakal. Hence, their followers failed to benefit from the government like Tukwak Bandung, whose followers were integrated into the police, a person wanders, and wildlife. When the violence generated by the Civil War. The violence generated by the Civil War had penetrated deeply into the newer society, affecting many aspects of daily life. Even though it has a circle, the newer victory is its way. The spear's imagery of an earlier era had given way to the rifles. How do you understand this piece of the quote? They, or he means the newer, were a long time ago, fought their war with spears. And now they are carrots to fight with. Followed by the song being sung at that time, the song said, "We are young men who compare our rifle-owning companions with the armed." The newer have known this century, and from the early 1920s, to the Congolese soldiers of the World War II to the Enyanya, one of the civil wars, and we carry our rifles. Like those of Waldetha. Like the cavalry. Like the Congolese army. Like the Enyanya guerrilla. Asterisk girls are run away from our guns, smoking like cigarettes when we fire them. Victory is on its way. Tu Quack Bangong Dio, quote, to remember him with it. There was a quote, which I think Tu Kwasi Banging must be to remember with this quote during his lifetime. He said, and let me quote it, "We felt hurt, we felt angry, and we felt that government had been unfair to us as a tribe in general. Sometimes our souls yearn for justice, because we are so desperate for it." In conclusion, Bongo's relations with both government and the Enyanya were delicately balanced, whereas government sent him gifts of cattle, and he replied with assurance of peace, and Tukuak sent his emissaries to the court, but he refused to meet with any government official or visit any government control. Bagong received Enyanya, who came to his cattle camp and they were looking to get, and he always fed them by giving them some cows, estimated to be 500 herds of cattle. This was to get the guerrillas settled down and prevented them from having to raid the village, as they were doing it to the other until mid-1972. Hztza Bol Bol.
Sajen, thank you. Anh chứ quên đàn chỉ cái thuốc này nó vô thuốc gan còn yom điện. Cái quý cô thế thì chắc là điện gan còn yom điện nó kén cho nó phanh kén cái này điện được vô. Ngay cái nó thuốc liền liền như cái thuốc nát. Thì dân mà là đó nó mà cái chia đưa ra nó về cái gan nó go learning is going to learn spelling cái nơi để mà là nơi để mà là ta này mà not together then mà pose Ramagol Queen book Queen. This is what I mean for doing both way. Kore wow chan nó chắc đến mà có lật cái tung rồi đó. Có mình ăn mấy cái tung quay lật cái bữa cấp tung quay của cái này này direct cái what cái nhà nhà vậy thì là mình ăn. Thế đi lúc Queen ăn bữa thuốc này qua nó mà cái thuốc nền đồng bộ ane bane te mal ke bane la bye 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 so bane min den nyoko mul ko 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 wala to na tiap de chak we mal nas ke nyal mal bye